No one can keep a secret forever. Beloved Pastor Bill Guthrie and his wife Sharon are pillars of their small community.
He was one of the best ministers that you could ever have the privilege of going and listening to. She was a very caring person.
But a mysterious tragedy reveals their pious image isn't what it seems.
I think some of them don't even remember what the actual truth was. And it's a house of cards, and they're just waiting for one of these cards to drop.
Hidden demons brought to light stun a town.
They'll lie, they'll cheat, they'll steal.
And rip a family apart.
There's certain expectations that come with being a pastor's daughter.
Soon, every dirty little secret will be revealed. It's the spring of 1999 in Woolsey, South Dakota, a sleepy farming town centered around faith and family. As the pastor of two local Presbyterian churches, Bill Guthrie is at the center of Woolsey town life.
Typically in these smaller communities, the church is not only a religious point of focus, but also a social point of focus.
It's not just Sunday when you go to church. There's a lot of other activities that are done through the churches in South Dakota, especially in Woolsey.
Bill was one of the best ministers that you could ever have the privilege of going and listening to.
I want to talk about sin.
He had such a charismatic attitude, not just on the stand, but with his parishioners too. He knew the Bible back and forth. He was a good preacher.
Bill's wife, Sharon, can always be found by his side, supporting both her husband and their community.
They both worked pretty diligently with the parish.
They went and socialized with a lot of members of the church and kept people coming to church that way.
Pastor Bill and Sharon first met more than 30 years ago and have been together ever since.
My mom was actually a year ahead of my dad in high school. They met at a campfire, and the rest is history, I guess. They fell in love. I think she just had the heart for church. She just thought that being a pastor's wife was where her heart wanted to lead her.
No matter how busy their lives in or out of the church get, their love comes first, and Bill and Sharon always make it a point to find time for each other.
They had breakfast every morning before my mom went to work. I always saw my dad holding hands, loving my mom. I always felt like that they respected each other and loved each other.
You know, they were very good together. They were very happy.
After raising 3 children, Bill and Sharon are eagerly anticipating having an empty nest at home and getting to spend some quality time together. The eldest of their 3 daughters, Suzanne, already has a husband and children of her own. Their youngest, Danielle, is heading off to college. And their middle daughter, Jenna Lou, is about to get married.
She was very excited about my sister's wedding. My mom planned a lot of little things for my sister's wedding. She had a reading that she was going to do for my sister. She had tablecloths and everything, and her dress and everything, all bought.
With a life full of faith and family, Bill and Sharon Guthrie have much to look forward to. But all of their dreams and plans for the future are about to come to a tragic end. On May 14th, 1999, Bill returns home from his morning prayers at church to find Sharon floating face down in their bathtub.
Bill said that she was taking a bath, and he'd come back over and found her passed out in the bathtub.
Bill quickly calls 911, but there's nothing that can be done. Everyone in town is stunned and saddened by the sudden death of Sharon Guthrie. With her family in shock and the community reeling from the news, everyone is clamoring for answers. What could have caused such a needlessly tragic death? And how did Sharon wind up face down in the tub?
She could have had a heart attack, she could have had a stroke, she could have slipped and fallen, bumped her head. There's just a variety of different things that could have happened.
Sharon's grief-stricken family makes arrangements to have her laid to rest. But first, investigators want to pin down the cause of death. Was Sharon's death a tragic accident, a natural occurrence, or something else?
They had already scheduled the funeral for Monday, and they were trying to get the body transported back to Woolsey so they could prepare for the funeral, and that's when the coroner called me and said, hey, let's get an autopsy done. You get one shot at that. Once the person is embalmed and buried, then the autopsies aren't very productive.
When the autopsy is complete, it leads to a shocking conclusion. One that only confuses Sharon's family and friends further. Whatever happened in that bathroom doesn't appear to have been the result of natural causes.
There was no evidence of physical trauma, a fall. There was no evidence of a blow to the head, for example, a broken arm or a broken leg from falling into the bathtub.
There was no heart condition, there was no stroke. There was nothing else that would have caused her to pass out.
While there are no signs of physical trauma, blood work reveals a mix of anxiety and sleeping medications in Sharon's system, including a near-lethal overdose of the sleeping pill temazepam. Now the question becomes, how did they get there?
Could she have accidentally consumed the drugs that were found at the scene, taken one and forgotten, and then taken another, become a little bit confused, and then taken another one, that sort of accidental ingestion?
You know, maybe she mistakenly took more pills than she was supposed to. Maybe she took 2 or 3 pills and it knocked her out in the bathtub. But the toxicology told us that there was a lot more pills in her system than that. I think at the minimum was 10, it was up to 20 pills were in her system at the time this happened.
So accident is possible but unlikely. Suicide is more likely.
But why would a woman who seemed to have so much to live for end it all? Could Sharon Guthrie really have committed suicide?
Everybody in the community was shocked that she was gone, and not knowing why, having it put in their heads that she had committed suicide. And the way people knew her, they were in disagreement with that.
There wasn't any outward appearance that she was depressed or sad or gonna commit suicide. She had Jenna Lou's wedding coming up, so there wasn't anything that we saw that would have indicated that she committed suicide, other than the fact that all these pills were in her system.
But Sharon's husband, Bill, reveals to investigators that while Sharon may have seemed perfectly happy on the outside, inside, she battled secret demons and suffered from anxieties no one knew about. He says the pressure of making their daughter's upcoming wedding perfect had been extremely stressful for Sharon, and having battled a weight problem for decades, she was increasingly distraught over how she'd look on the big day.
My mom always struggled with being overweight. She tried diet pills, but that was just who she was.
Weddings are very emotional events, even under the best of circumstances. People want to see this perfect family. I'm sure there was a lot of pressure on Sharon to live up to expectations, and if she's not feeling great about herself, it's a trigger.
Everyone thought she didn't have any problems or fears, but she liked to keep it hidden.
Bill Guthrie tells deputies that although he never thought it would come to this, he's not completely shocked by his wife's suicide. And he suggests there's more to it than just insecurity about her appearance. He says Sharon had been fighting recently with their daughter, Suzanne. Sharon had caused a scene at Suzanne's wedding, and Suzanne was determined to prevent her sister from suffering the same humiliation.
My mom and my mother-in-law got in a screaming match before I walked down the aisle.
Mom, do you know how much you embarrassed me?
When it came time to my sister's wedding, I did not want the same thing to happen. We're gonna have a calm wedding, we're gonna enjoy this wedding, and that's just the way it's gonna be.
Bill Guthrie insists this blowout weeks earlier caused emotional turmoil that lingered in Sharon, and that, coupled with her anxieties, it may have been too much to bear. Could inner demons and the pressure of creating a perfect wedding have pushed Sharon Guthrie to suicide? The evidence seems to suggest that she took her own life. But investigators will soon discover there's more going on behind the Guthrie family's saintly facade than anyone is letting on. Life in the pastor's house turns out to be much less virtuous than it appeared.
When they first told me their suspicions, I really didn't know what to think. I mean, that was something that had never crossed my mind.
Pastor's wife, Sharon Guthrie, has drowned in her own bathtub after what seems to be a suicidal overdose of sleeping pills. Sharon's husband, Bill, tells investigators and his daughters that he's not entirely surprised his wife has killed herself.
I remember him saying she did this to herself, and saying that she was depressed and we just didn't see it, and that's just how she was reacting to it, just to take her own life.
Their daughter, Suzanne, can't believe it. But she tells investigators that if her mother was suicidal, it's her father's fault. Her family's facade might appear flawless, but life in the pastor's home was not as saintly as it seemed. Suzanne claims her father often abused her mother verbally, ridiculing her about her weight.
Have you really looked at yourself in the mirror lately?
I'm trying as best I can.
When I was a kid, it was generally behind closed doors.
I didn't even want you leaving the house looking like that.
But you could hear them fighting. I think she had been called fat so much that it just was ingrained in her head.
Because of his position, he tried to treat her respectfully in public, but behind closed doors, he kind of treated her as a second-class citizen, was my understanding.
Emotional abuse can be more damaging in some ways than physical abuse because it gets to your self-esteem. It makes you feel worthless. It makes you feel like you have nowhere to go. You're stuck. And you feel terrible about yourself.
But even with these demons plaguing her, Sharon's daughters find it unimaginable that their mother took her own life. And Suzanne disputes her father's assertion that the fight she had with her mother a few weeks earlier was traumatic enough to have pushed her over the edge.
It seemed like a normal mother-daughter argument that happens, and based on our conversation with Suzanne, it wasn't something that she felt was unusual for them.
For Suzanne, there is one detail about her mother's death that troubles her more than any other. One that makes it impossible for her to believe this was a suicide: the state in which her mother's body was found.
I knew my mom, and I knew if she was gonna commit suicide, that she wouldn't have been naked. She didn't want anybody ever to see her naked. That was just her statement. A lot of times, when I die, I don't want to be naked. So that was one of the things that I started thinking of, that she wouldn't have killed herself in the bathtub.
Suzanne insists investigators dig deeper. They begin questioning family, friends, and churchgoers, looking for any motivation for Sharon to have taken her own life. And after piecing together a profile of Sharon, They determined that while she definitely had her stresses, they were nothing new in her 30-year marriage. Her mental state was not consistent with suicidal depression, and it's unlikely that Sharon killed herself.
There was no note. She had no history of suicides in her family. And another factor was the fact that she had something to look forward to, the wedding that was coming up, and she seemed outwardly excited about that, so we didn't believe that it was a suicide.
But if Sharon hadn't committed suicide, and if she hadn't accidentally overdosed on the sleeping pills, could her death have been a case of foul play?
Because Sharon's body was found in her home and there was no sign of forced entry, a good investigator would take a good, hard look at people who had access to that home.
In questioning her daughters, investigators learned of a series of strange accidents that occurred in the house in the weeks leading up to Sharon's death. And now they have to wonder if they were more than just accidents. First, there was a near-deadly trip on the basement stairs.
She said that she was going down the stairs and that the light must have been burnt out or broke out or something. And all of a sudden she realized there was a string across her foot.
Then, both Sharon and Bill were nearly electrocuted during an intimate moment in the bathtub.
My mom and dad supposedly were having a romantic evening, and the light in the bathroom was not working, so they put a light next to the bathtub.
Both of them are almost killed when the lamp falls into the tub. Most disturbing of all, Sharon had gone to the doctor just weeks before, complaining of mysterious symptoms alarmingly similar to those of an overdose of sleeping pills.
One morning she was very groggy, and the doctor's observations of her were very concerning, but they ran tests, toxicology, things like that, and they couldn't find anything wrong with her. There was no explanation. She'd never been groggy before, but they couldn't find anything.
All of these things are adding up, and, you know, it's become suspicious because nobody has that bad of luck. So the investigators are now looking closely at these events. What is the real story going on in the Guthrie household?
Could these incidents have been someone's botched attempts at murder? Sharon's death becomes a homicide investigation. Who might want to hurt Sharon Guthrie, and why? The wife of a pastor is an unlikely target for murder, but they learn the pious family could have made at least one enemy, their daughter Danielle's ex-boyfriend.
My youngest sister had had a fight with her boyfriend, so my dad made the assumption that her boyfriend was trying to hurt her.
The Guthries had strict rules for their 3 daughters when it came to dating.
My husband and I, my senior year of high school, had 8 dates. Les had to be in church, and he could come to our house on Sunday and have dinner, and then we'd have 1 date that week, but he had to be in church.
I had to call him to get permission to ask his daughter out. He was very intimidating.
If Bill and Sharon didn't approve of Danielle's boyfriend, and if that played a role in Danielle ending their relationship, could he have held her parents responsible for their breakup? Seething with resentment against the Guthries, might this ex-boyfriend have plotted revenge?
They thought at first it might be Danielle's ex-boyfriend, that he may have snuck in the house and done something like this.
Could Sharon's daughter's spurned lover be concealing a deadly secret? Investigators uncover a sexy conspiracy that rocks the community.
I asked him about it, and he said he was just doing it for the sex. And that tells you a lot about the kind of person he was. He was lying to everybody.
After being found drugged and drowned in her bathtub, Sharon Guthrie's death has quickly gone from accident to suicide to foul play. Family members have mentioned that the youngest daughter, Danielle, had an ex-boyfriend with an axe to grind. Could he have lashed out at her family after their breakup?
When a teenager experiences his or her first love, sometimes they don't know how to deal with those emotions, particularly when they are under an emotional stress like the breakup of your first real relationship. They can be impulsive and act out in a violent way.
But Danielle's boyfriend has a solid alibi, and he's ruled out as a suspect.
They thought at first it might be Danielle's ex-boyfriend, but that was excluded because he had an alibi.
But if the ex-boyfriend isn't behind Sharon's death, who else would want her dead, and why? Could Sharon Guthrie have had a secret that nobody knew about? Something worth killing for. Investigators already know all was not as it seemed between husband and wife.
I'm really ashamed of you. And you should really be ashamed of yourself.
And as they talk to friends and neighbors, a shocking story about Bill catches their attention.
We started interviewing people in the community and immediately started hearing stories about her husband, which weren't good. You know, his reputation wasn't very good, considering he was a minister, and we were kind of surprised to hear it.
Rumor has it that the seemingly devout pastor has some unholy interests. Namely, he is overly flirtatious with his female parishioners.
My dad was always the type that always was like in the center of attention with anybody in the room. You know, you knew he was there. And he was always nice to women.
But the talk in town is that Bill's enjoyment of women goes beyond innocent flirtation, and that their pastor is hiding a scandalous past. Gossips say he was forced to leave his previous church in Nebraska because of an affair with a married woman.
A friend said that she had heard something awful about my dad and wanted me to hear about it so that I didn't hear about it from other people. And she said, I heard that your dad was having an affair. And I was shocked at that point. Went and talked to my dad about the affair, and he totally denied it.
But when authorities confront Bill about the affair, he finally comes clean.
We talked to him about the affair, and he'd admitted it. This was a fact. There was something going on, and it had been going on for some time.
Reluctantly, Pastor Bill begins to reveal his secrets to investigators. He confesses that 5 years ago, at his previous post in Nebraska, he had fallen in love with one of his parishioners. Though both of them were already married, they began a scandalous affair that tore their church apart.
I knew who she was. And my youngest sister actually went to the prom with her youngest son. So, I mean, it was a family friend.
It became a problem for him in that church because the rumors were running around so much. It started to affect his ability to be the minister there.
There is redemption through forgiveness.
As rumors swirl, Bill is transferred to his current church in Woolsey, which ends the speculation about the affair. But investigators learn it did not end the affair itself. For 5 years, Bill and his mistress have continued their illicit long-distance relationship. He even came up with a scheme to have his current church in Woolsey pay for his travel expenses so he could keep his affair going.
He told the church that he was being counseled back in Nebraska, and he wanted to stay with the same counselor, and the church in Woolsey agreed to pay his mileage to go back and forth for this counseling. And it turns out he was never in any counseling for anything. He was continuing this affair with this lady. I mean, that was his intent and purpose of going back to Nebraska.
He'd stay in a motel and wait for her to come, then they'd have their evening together, engaged in sexual activities.
Could this salacious affair have been a motive for murder? Had Sharon discovered her husband's dirty little secret, and had that knowledge gotten her killed? If she had threatened to expose the affair, the consequences for Bill could have been devastating.
If it's revealed that he was kicked out of his prior church because of an affair, the chances of him ever being able to work as a pastor again would be nil.
Some suspect that the fear of exposure and ruination could have been enough to motivate Bill to murder his wife and protect his secret.
I mean, if you're willing to go in front of your church where people come every week to worship God, and you're willing to get up there and lie and make up stories, I mean, what else are you willing to do?
But others find it almost impossible to believe a man of God could be capable of committing such a heinous crime.
Nobody wants to think that the man that's bringing them to the Word every week did something this horrible.
To think that the pastor of that congregation is capable of murder is a huge leap, even sometimes for law enforcement. They're members of the community. They might even be members of the congregation. They think, no way, it can't be this guy. He's the pastor.
If it wasn't Bill, then perhaps his mistress had tired of competing with Sharon for his affection and killed her herself.
No honest person would be comfortable with having a long-term affair with the head of a congregation. It suggests that this person might have a lot more secrets.
Local law enforcement decides it's time to track down Pastor Bill's mystery woman.
I think the majority of people may be able to keep a secret for a while, but at some point or another, this is going to all collapse.
Investigators are taking a hard look at Sharon Guthrie's husband and town pastor, Bill, and his longtime mistress to determine whether or not their secret relationship may have led to Sharon's death. They decide it's time to track down Bill's mysterious lover and hear her side of the story.
I went to Nebraska and interviewed her 2 different times. She obviously liked this guy a lot.
Yes.
She talked about the relationship she had with the defendant, how it started, how often it happened, the extent of the affair. Bill Guthrie was telling her that he was going to leave his wife, that he loved her. He was telling her what she wanted to hear to continue the affair.
But while she was ready for something more, Bill refused to break with Sharon. Had Bill's lover gotten tired of waiting and done the unthinkable?
Paramours can get jealous. They can get upset. They may not be stable in the first place, and they may act out in very irrational and impulsive ways, and that could lead to violence potentially.
But Bill's mistress tells investigators she had no reason to want Sharon dead because she was done with Bill. She had ended their affair months ago.
When he refused to leave his wife, that was the end of it. I had to end the relationship. It was over. I couldn't be with him anymore.
She'd broken the affair off with him like in end of January, first part of February. She was just tired of this sneaking around and you know, this kind of behavior. She didn't want to do that anymore.
Then, after revealing all the details of their scandalous relationship, Bill's mistress makes a startling admission. Bill had called her, insisting they get back together right after Sharon died.
The day after the funeral, he called her and wanted to get together. She told us that. He was going to start dating again right after the funeral.
If I recall correctly, the conversation was, hey, what are you doing? Like, we want to get together. I'm ready to continue our relationship. At that point, she kind of said, hey, I'm moved on. I've got another boyfriend. that's not married that is going to treat me right, isn't going to use me for sex, and that's what she did.
Bill's phone call hardly seems like the behavior of a devastated and grieving husband, let alone a man of the cloth.
It says, here is someone who is not only an adulterer, he's a fraud. He's someone who is dishonest. We can't trust anything he says because he's held himself out to the community as this paradigm of virtuosity, and it turns out he's not that at all. So what else has he lied about?
Investigators are now certain Bill was somehow involved in his wife's murder.
If he had divorced Sharon, all this would have come out about the affair, about all these lies. If Sharon would have stepped up and said, I'm done, that would have all come out, and he couldn't live with that. And that's why, in my opinion, that's why he decided to kill her.
But while investigators are long on suspicion, they're short on evidence. Despite her story, they still can't totally rule out his mistress's involvement. Deputies decide to revisit the crime scene to see if it yields more clues that would point to Bill or his mistress. But a troubling discovery creates a major stumbling block.
Went back to the house and tried to recover some of the stuff from the scene. But the ladies from the church had come in and thoroughly cleaned the place. Whatever crime scene was there was gone long before we ever got a chance to do that. That made it difficult.
With the crime scene wiped clean, investigators turn to Bill's office at the church and seize his computer.
At that point, we knew about the affair, so one of the things we were looking for was emails, because we knew that Bill Guthrie had been emailing the lady in Nebraska, so we wanted to look at those emails to see if they had talked about this happening or if there was a conspiracy to do this.
But the lustful emails only prove that Bill had been having an affair, not that he and his mistress were conspiring to murder Sharon.
There wasn't anything to indicate that she knew anything about this, and she had moved on. She had found another boyfriend, so she was out of the picture.
Having ruled out Bill's mistress as a murder suspect, investigators delve into Bill's internet search history. And what they find convinces them that they have zeroed in on Sharon's killer.
There's been a lot of searches on his computer for bathtub and household accidents.
It's not coincidence that also now she drowned in a bathtub, and he's searching for the topics of suicide, bathroom drownings. I quit believing in coincidence a long time ago.
There are even searches for temazepam, the very drug found in Sharon's system at the time of her death.
This becomes a defining moment in the investigation because there's really little innocent explanation for this. How can he explain this away?
But when confronted with this information, Bill does attempt to explain it away.
Bill was kind of indicating that, yeah, it could have been someone else on the computer. It could have been Sharon, grandkid, whatever.
Investigators need a smoking gun, something more concrete to prove Bill poisoned, then drowned his wife. So they focus on tracking the sleeping pills. They obtain Bill and Sharon's prescription records and discover that the temazepam was in Bill's name, not Sharon's, and that he had amassed a mountainous supply of the potentially deadly drug.
He'd gotten the script and he went out to Kmart and filled it. Then he called back up to the doctor's office, said he'd lost that script, and would they call in another one for him, and they did. And he picked that one up.
The pills are what really kind of threw some red flags at us. When we found out that he had filled these prescriptions 4 times in the last 15 days, that's what really made us think that he had done it.
Investigators now believe they've linked Pastor Bill to the murder weapon. But how was he able to get Sharon to take as many as 20 sleeping pills without knowing it? Investigators catch a break when Sharon's daughters let slip a small, seemingly harmless detail about their mother's morning routine.
My mom would get up out of bed and have her glass of chocolate milk and get in the bathtub, and get her hair washed, and get dressed and ready for work.
Did Bill Guthrie turn a simple glass of chocolate milk into an instrument of death?
You can put a good deal of sedatives in it without her noticing. It's a good vehicle for drugs that might have a taste, because chocolate milk has a lot of flavor to it.
The events of the day of the murder, Bill Guthrie had about 60 pills available to him. We believe he took the pills apart. He put them into Sharon's chocolate milk, which she drank, and then got into the bathtub because she always took baths and not showers. And the pill did what it was supposed to do. It knocks them out, especially at the level she was. In the bath water, she then drowned in the tub.
Investigators now believe they have Bill dead to rights, but the evidence against him is circumstantial, and there are no witnesses. Will a jury of his peers ever believe their beloved spiritual leader had murder in his heart?
I know I'm a sinner too.
There's still one final secret waiting to be uncovered, one that could destroy the prosecution's entire case.
And he brings in something, he shows he's innocent. Look, here it is. You know, this should exonerate him.
Prosecutors have linked Bill Guthrie to the sleeping pills that left his wife, Sharon, drugged and drowned in her bathtub. But they fear convincing a jury to convict a charismatic man of God might be impossible.
I've sinned. Oh, I've sinned.
With no witnesses and no conclusive proof, investigators put their faith in the one family member who suspects this holy man turned his back on the Lord. His daughter, Suzanne.
My mother did not kill herself.
They asked me if I'd be willing to wear a wire and to question my dad. And when they first asked me that, I kind of was hesitant, but yet in the back of my mind, I wanted to know also.
I was concerned. I felt like she shouldn't do it at the beginning, but she told me that she needed to do this to find the truth. She wanted to know what happened. She wore the wire for that reason and that reason alone.
Suzanne agrees to help investigators, but the notion of confronting her father is frightening.
The preparation for wearing a wire was very nerve-wracking. They told me to be normal, and they said don't hesitate in asking him questions, but you know, you can't get angry and you can't get upset and you can't make him think that you're trying to entrap him. You know, you have to be very careful in your wording, and they gave me the questions to ask.
For a daughter to go in and essentially set up her father to reveal that he is responsible for her mother's death had to be an incredibly stressful, painful, awful situation for her. Perhaps her safety is at risk, because if he's willing to kill her mother, what would stop him from killing her?
Not knowing what to expect, Suzanne puts on the wire and engages her father in a conversation about her mother's death.
He came and got really close in my face and said that she did this because he told her about the affair, that he had told my mom the night before she died that that's why she committed suicide.
Your mother committed suicide. There's nothing I can do about it.
It had your name on the bottom.
Suzanne pleads with her father to tell her the truth and put to rest the rumors that are running rampant around town.
Else, and I just wish you would be honest with us.
I point blank told him, I said, the sheriff's department thinks that you killed Mom.
It's all pointing to you. Everything is right there.
I think the sheriff's department was hoping that they would get in confession, but he was very vague.
I wouldn't do anything to harm her.
I kind of wonder if he thought maybe I was taping him at that point.
He never denied it. I mean, you got your daughter in there in your face saying, "Why did you kill my mother?"
Everything is right there.
And he doesn't deny it. He doesn't say anything.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Someone comes in and accuses you of killing someone, in my opinion, you're gonna have a different reaction than what he had.
Without a confession, proving Bill's guilt is already shaping up to be an uphill battle. But the situation is suddenly made even worse when Bill's lawyer produces a shocking piece of new evidence that throws the whole case into doubt and seems to eliminate Bill as a suspect. It's a suicide note from Sharon.
The defense attorney comes up to me and says that he has this suicide note that they found in a liturgy book in the office of the church.
The suicide note said that my mom was sorry about what happened at my wedding and that she didn't want John Lou's wedding to be ruined like my wedding was.
Could investigators have been wrong all this time? Did they miss something when they ruled out suicide?
What are we supposed to do, with this note? It was typed up, it wasn't signed.
Something that's typed can't be examined for handwriting analysis. If this was a legitimate suicide note, it would call into question the entire investigation and would probably result in acquittal of Bill Guthrie.
But daughter Suzanne is certain the note is a forgery.
I'm sorry I ruined your wedding. I mean, just in the shortness of it, I don't think that's how she would have written it if she would have written it. It wasn't until I saw the suicide note that I knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that my dad had done that.
Investigators also suspect Bill wrote it himself, so they boot up the Guthrie family's home computer. Not only do they find a draft of the suicide note, but the date on the note proves it could only have been typed by Sharon if she had written it from the grave.
The expert found the note on the computer that was typed 3 months after she had died. The note was typed like August 8th. She died in May. It exposed him again for the person he is. He's willing to lie and cheat and try to get out of this.
Bill Guthrie's last-ditch effort to free himself backfires and becomes the smoking gun the prosecution has been waiting for. His fall from grace is now complete.
Thy kingdom come, thy will be done.
Pastor Bill Guthrie is convicted of murder in the first degree and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Having the suicide note obviously helped our cause tremendously. That was his last-ditch effort to get out of this, and he got burned.
Bill Guthrie thought murdering his wife would allow him to keep his infidelities from ever becoming public. But he couldn't hide his secrets forever.
Even something that seems like a small secret to you or I or to the general public, when you are talking about people with sociopathic personalities, secrets can motivate them to do drastic things like murder.
They'll lie, they'll cheat, they'll steal, and they'll do twice that to cover it up. And they don't think about the consequences. They don't think how it's going to affect other people. And when they get caught in a lie, they tell more lies to try to get out of it. Eventually, it's going to all fall apart, and he got what he deserved.